welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC today, Rach, and I'm joined by my guest, Robin Lingenberg. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Hey, and thanks.
How long have you been playing Powered by the Apocalypse games, Robin? What was your gateway game?
My gateway game was Apocalypse World, and I started playing it when the game came out. Was it like 12 years ago or something?
Yeah, that sounds about right. What was your first player character?
Oh, my first character. I started as a master of ceremonies, but the first character I got to play myself, I think it was a really creepy Maestro D.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that playbook when you have a place yourself, and I was like a owner of a house with prostitutes and gambling and gladiators and things like that.
Oh, that sounds super cool. Yeah, the Master D, I think, is a playbook that doesn't get enough of a spotlight, but there's some really cool, creepy things you could do with it. It's like a different flavor of a heart holder.
Yeah, and you're usually kind of a little bit weaker, so you need to play this kind of charismatic and intelligent person in order to do the things you want to do. You can't, like the hard holder, just take your army of thugs and force people. You need to be a little bit smooth.
Yeah, you gotta play the social games in the community rather than just showing up with the whole military and having your way that way.
Yeah, I think actually my way to success in that game was to sleep with the other characters. That was my main tactic.
I totally get it. I've totally slept my way around Apocalypse World games, and I played once a game where I had it was actually Urban Shadows, where I had Urban Shadows bingo, where I went how many characters could I sleep around with and get my way with?
It's nice with a game that actually focus on that, or at least don't shy away from it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sex moves and the special moves are there for a reason. We might as well use them.
Yeah. True.
So it's time for our first segment of the show, Read a Sitch, where we talk about parts of Powered by the Apocalypse play culture and GMing.
Read a Sitch.
Robin, we were talking a little bit before recording about improv and how improv can work with Powered by the Apocalypse games. You said like you had a lot of thoughts on that. Care to share them with the audience?
Yeah, sure. The improv part of Apocalypse World was the thing that nailed me from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the reason I wanted to convert the philosophy and the mechanics from Apocalypse World into the Kult universe. The whole system working like a problem generator, more or less. The moves all working towards the same goal to escalate situation and create drama. When playing Apocalypse World, I always felt like the stories, they got their own life, more or less, and kind of lived on without my direct influence as a master of ceremonies.
Was that a big change for you as a GM? Speaking from my experience, the stereotype is the GM is in a position where they're responsible for producing a lot of the story and a lot of the problems. But as you were saying, your experience was the game and the players produce them for you.
Yeah, exactly. It was like suddenly you sat there and you were listening to the players creating the story instead of the players listening in to you telling them the story. So it was a great change, and I think it changed me a lot as a role player. Without it, I would probably not have designed this game at all.
What was the biggest change in your play style because of the focus on improv?
My biggest change was that instead of preparing scenes and things to happen, I started preparing choices. So I just was thinking about, okay, what can happen next? Okay, we have this kind of hard hold. We have these different powers in the hard holds. And when the characters were creating different actions and consequences, it was more like, okay, what can happen next? Instead of preparing the storyline before we were playing.
Was there any point when your players surprised you with what they brought to the table, where it changed how you expected the game to play out?
Yeah, more or less every play session. So instead of trying to create structure, I was just flowing with the players, putting them into hard choices And then I was waiting for them to decide what was going to happen.
Do you have any advice for GMs who are just starting in Powered by the Apocalypse games who might not be used to thinking about GMing in this way?
Yeah, I would say the first step you need to do is you need to take a step back as a GM. Don't prepare too much in the beginning. You need to be like open-minded. You need to focus on the players and the player characters. Because if you do that and you build on questions, answers, and let the player decide for you, you will find out that this type of games, the mechanics, everything is kind of built around flowing with the players, not forcing them anywhere.
In terms of listening, do you find that the way that you interact with your players now is very different? Do you give them more space to describe situations, or do you find that you're asking different questions?
I would say that sometimes I let them describe things, but the biggest change is that when I ask questions, I ask open-ended questions. I want them to elaborate. I want them to decide what is going to happen next. So it's not yes and no questions anymore. It's more like, what are you going to do now? What is going to happen? And see what they comes up with. I think sometimes the players need help, especially if they are new. So it's sometimes totally okay to just sit down, all of you, and discuss, okay, what is going to be happening next? Do anyone have any good ideas? Because sometimes the players just get stuck and the power of choosing can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I've heard that described as analysis paralysis,
Yeah.
The situation where you have too many options, so you can't pick any one.
No, it's totally true. And also, if you have been playing a lot of games where you're more of a passive bystander or listener to the story the GM telling you, then it's kind of hard to suddenly be the protagonist of the story, the one that the story is really about. So I think that change can be kind of overwhelming for some players.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I've seen that conversation both online and with friends offline, where they're used to playing the game from the perspective of their character is someone who has things happen to them, not someone who's making active choices. But they also have an expectation that the GM has all the plot and all the world in their head, and they're going to unveil it as the player character moves forward.
Yeah. I think the good thing about these kind of games is that you get better on making those choices. So it's just about experience and playing. The same thing for the game masters. When you have played a lot of games, you will be able to improvise good situations and choices without really thinking about it.
On that note, do you think it's important for GMs empowered by the Apocalypse games to also spend time in the player seat to get a sense of how those mechanics and the improv tools work from the player perspective as well as the GM perspective? And also vice versa, with players taking on the GM seat every once in a while.
Yeah, of course, it could be really good to change seats and perspectives. I think you need to experience both. But I also know that in many groups, it's only one guy or girl that wants to take that seat, and it can be hard to convince your players to reverse the roles.
That's an excellent point. There's a big intimidation factor in sitting in that MC or GM seat for the first time, especially if the game operates very differently from a lot of other games on the market. You said you both played and GM'd. Did you find switching those positions gave you more insight in terms of how to run the game?
Usually when I play today, I think I'm kind of an obnoxious player because I usually sit and I start thinking about, okay, how could I have been doing this? How can things be changed? It's not like I'm opposing the game master when we are playing, but I think as a player, I'm a critical player, so I can probably be hard to play with.
You're the player who's like, I could do this better.
Or I'm the one, afterwards, after each session, I come with advice on how things could go forward. And especially if I notice, that the story is very strict or controlled, or that we are experiencing problems in some way and going forward, I usually want to give it like advice on how we could advance in a good way. So I don't know. Maybe it's not so welcome always.
Well, I definitely know, speaking from my experience and a lot of friends, a lot of them started in GMing because they had a bad session and then they went, oh, wait, I could do this better. I don't always need to be a player. I'm going to go do this now.
Yeah, but it can be kind of sensitive, I think, to get critique for your game mastering. It can be so personal when you have put in a lot of work and like your soul in it, and you find out that the players are not really satisfied with your story or whatever.
Oh yeah, that could be, as you said, it's very personal sometimes with jamming, where you bring so much of yourself to the table and then your players are like, well, no, this isn't good. Do you have any advice on ways players can give good creative criticism to GMs who might be trying out improv GMing for the first time?
Yeah, I would suggest like sit down afterwards. Don't go home directly. Sit down in like 30 minutes, 60 minutes and just talk about what was good in this session. Because talking about what is good helps the GM to understand what she did good in that session and what she probably should focus on in the next one also. You don't need to discuss what was really bad, because usually you notice that when you play, but if the players aren't so enthusiastic about something, they will probably not mention it either if you just take out the good things. You can also give the GM wishes of things you would like to see in the story, and in that way help him or her to get some inspiration or ideas. You can also ask for certain things you want to come up in play by the choices you make for your character. For example, choosing a playbook that introduces certain teams, or choosing moves that introduces certain things in the story.
This seems like a great time to move on to our next segment, Open Your Brain, where Robin and I are going to discuss the game he was recently working on, Kult Divinity Lost.
Open your brain.
Robin, how would you pitch Kult to the listeners?
I would say that Kult Divinity Lost is a psychological horror game with the Apocalypse World engine. Stories in Kult Divinity Lost take place in a world pretty much like the modern day world, but behind the facade there are a hidden truth. You play individuals that have started to sense that the world isn't what it seems to be. By traumatic and supernatural events, the player characters have started to be aware of the cracks in the facade, and in return they have started to catch the attention of other beings, guardians upholding the lie, and creatures looking for revenge for forgotten sins. To play Kult Divinity Lost is about finding out about your true self and starting the pilgrimage for your lost divinity. The player characters explore the world of today by twisting it into the cult universe gritty image, and can by doing so explore scary themes and problems from the real world that may have been too heavy for another game. So Kult Divinity Lost is first of all a psychological horror game, but it also contains elements of survival horror, mystery, dark fantasy, and science fiction.
This game sounds so cool to me.
Yeah,
it's got a bunch of my favorite themes in it. How are the mechanics in Kult Divinity Lost different than Apocalypse World or other games on the market?
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, Apocalypse World is all about scarcity and resources. You want to take something from someone else, or someone else wants to take something from you. In Kult Divinity Lost, resources isn't a problem. The focus is more about insight of yourself, your past, and the world around you. Because when you're playing, you're gonna investigate and explore the world, and you're gonna understand that there are another world, or actually different layers of the world behind the ones you thought was the real world.
When I was looking at the mechanics, I saw that the rolls, instead of using 2d6, are actually using 2d10. Can you explain that design choice to our listeners?
Yeah, it's based on 3 different things. First of all, in Cult of Interlost we have 10 special higher powers called Archons. And those have 10 shadow powers called Death Angels. So together they made up of 20 higher powers. So the 2d10 in some way symbolizes those higher powers. The other thing is that we have like 3 levels of playbooks, or archetypes as we call them in Cult of Interlost. You can start as a sleeper, which is like a person that don't know anything about the real world. Or you can play an aware character, which is a character that have been starting to think that something is wrong. And that's like the normal standard archetype. And then you have a 3rd level called Enlightened archetypes. And those know a lot about the truth of the world, and they are in tune with the supernatural powers in the world. When we designed the attributes and the choices of dices, we had to have in mind that you were able to go from sleeper to aware to enlightened, 3 levels of improvement. And that means that you also need to have higher scales or bigger scales between the modifications in attributes in order to be able to like raise them continuously between all these levels. And when you play with 2d10, that means that you can have up to +5 in an attribute instead of 2d6s. When you have attributes over +3, they get really, really powerful and gets a little bit broken.
Mm-hmm.
And the third reason for the choice of dices was actually that we had an old game that some of my colleagues had been working on with 2d10, and they really liked d10s. So that was also a contributing factor.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can also say that when it comes to successes in Cult of Interlost, as we use 2d10s, the success rates are different. So a complete success is 15 or higher. A success with a complication is between 10 and 14. And when your result is 9 or lower, it's a failure.
That's a different way of thinking of it, because I'm so used to 6 or lower.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity for consequences to happen. 9. Oh, now I have to game the system.
A good anecdote is that one of our game masters at a convention some years ago, she hadn't really noticed that we had changed the dices, so she let the players roll 2d6 in her play sessions. And she kind of complained to me that the players never succeeded with the rolls, and I was like, yeah, but they should. And she's told me, yeah, but it's almost impossible to get 15 with 2d6. And I was like, no, you should roll 2d10s. So
that's so funny. Like, you have to hit 9 to make a success happen, and you can't do that in 2d6. That must have been just an absolutely awful game, or possibly a spectacular game.
Yeah, I think they managed to like roll between 10 and 14, so they got like only successes with complications or failures, of course.
Another interesting part I saw in the player character building section was this idea called dark secrets. Robin, could you explain what a dark secret is and how it works with the game?
Yeah, a dark secret in Cult of Interlost is an event in the character's past that have kind of shaped them, and also is the source for the horror they are investigating or haunted by in the stories. So it can, for example, be that the character have been guilty of a crime, and when the story starts, this crime and the consequence of that crime is haunting the character. Maybe in form of nightmares or by hauntings by the victim the character caused. Or it can also be that the character is wanted by the police or other powerful enemies that want to get revenge in some way. The dark secrets, there are several of them. Each archetype have 5 different dark secrets that are recommended, but each player can choose whichever dark secret they want when they create a character. Then you discuss this with the other players, depending on the setting of the campaign. Because all cult stories, they happen in our own world, but you can always choose, like, which time period are we going to play in? Are we going to play in today? Or are we going to play in the 1980s? Or even in the beginning of the century? And then, depending on how you organize or structure the dark secrets, they will have a big impact on the story. You could, for example, choose to have a common dark secret for all the characters, which would mean, for example, that all the characters could have been guilty of one crime. They could have been friends as kids and all participated in a murder. And now, when the story starts 10 years later, that crime comes back and haunts them in some way. Or you can have a common theme for all the dark secrets. For example, it could all be about a cult in New York City's subways. And one character maybe is chosen by the cult to be their chosen priestess. One other character can be a victim of the cult's crimes. Maybe a kidnapping offer, or in some way have been escaping the cult. And the third one could be a character that have been losing a dear one to the cult. Maybe their spouse was investigating the cult and disappeared some months back. And when you then play, you kind of mix all those different stories and backgrounds, the dark secrets, and you use them as a generator for problems and drives in the characters and base the story on that. You also have the possibility to have the players choosing whichever dark secret they want. And then you as a game master will have a little more time to spend on preparations between play sessions to kind of connect all the dark secrets and understand how the characters' stories are connected.
It's such a neat idea for providing hints and tools for the GM to make all the player characters involved in the plot.
I also think that it's a great tool for creating horror, because if you let the player decide what is going to be the seed for this horror story, you kind of give the player the agency to choose what kind of horror the story is going to be about. Is it going to be about guilt? Is it going to be about haunting spirits? Is it going to be about occult forces or forgotten gods? You let the players decide, which also makes them more motivated to investigate and explore this kind of story you create together.
On a related note, in the GM section, I found a section called the horror contract, which seemed like a really cool idea. Can you explain the horror contract to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. The horror contract is a number of points, you can say, things to think about when you play a horror story. It's different advices for the game master on how to handle horror in a story in an effective way. It can be how you use different locations, or how you can create tension by capturing the right atmosphere in different situations. And it's also about having a discussion with the players where you take up their fears and things they don't want to explore when you game. For example, if someone have something really traumatic that's been happening to them, you don't need to bring it into the story, because the goal is not to make people feel bad. It's to make people feel happy and scared at the same time.
Finally, what's your favorite move in the game and why?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and I actually choose the move Keep It Together. I designed this move when I was studying behavioral psychology at the university. We had a therapist that was lecturing about how people experience stress under traumatic events. He was working as a trauma counselor and was hired by different companies in the state when it happened big events like accidents or reorganizations where a lot of people were sacked. So he told us about how humans usually react to great stress by the flight, fight, or freeze response. And typically, like flight responses can be to cry or blaming yourself, while fight response usually take the form of anger. The freeze response typically result in apathetic behavior. And I integrated these responses in the move Keep It Together, as the player has to choose one of several minor conditions when she succeeds with a complication, and is subjected to total panic and the most basic instincts when she fails her roll. Usually the game master takes control of the character when she fails a Keep It Together roll, and let the character flee in panic or freeze totally or just fight in total rage. And these conditions that you get from Keep It Together, they also lower a special bar you have called stability. And when this bar decreases, the player gets information about how stressed the character are. And you have different stress levels that also affect special moves called disadvantages, and also affect the character's ability to interact with the supernatural in the world. In order to increase stability again, the character needs to seek up relations and kind of seek comfort from them. And that was the big point of this lecturer, that the only way to really heal people that are under a lot of trauma is to talk with them. I can also say that it's a really good thing as a game master in a cult story to have the players actively seeking up their relations, nurturing those relations, because then you have something you can take from them and threaten in order to create horror.
Yeah, that just the amount of thought behind that move just blows my mind. I love how you brought in this information and research from actual psychological studies and how people heal from trauma in real life and put it into the game.
I think it's kind of simple way to use it mechanically, but it's still kind of capturing reality without overcomplicating. I think usually when horror games is handling trauma and stress, they are kind of overreacting to it. So as soon as you see a ghost, you turn totally crazy, or like you're evolving hallucinations when you see a dead body. But people usually don't get like totally insane as soon as they are subjected to trauma in reality. We usually react with stress, and we react like in basic ways. I wanted to capture that.
Another part of character building is the disadvantages. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages in the game. But Robin, you said disadvantages in particular are very important. Why is that?
A disadvantage is a move that the players get to choose themselves. Every player character have 2 disadvantages from the beginning. This moves works in a little bit different than the typical moves in the games powered by the apocalypse. The player is rolling for the move, but the move gives the game master actions. Typically, a disadvantage either give the game master an action directly in the scene, so you have a consequence. It can, for example, be that a person with greed have to react to the greed in some way in the scene. Or disadvantages give the game master holds that she can spend later in the story for the disadvantage. You could, for example, be haunted by an evil spirit, and the game master can use the hold when the spirit try to possess you or hurt your loved ones or leave evil messages or in other ways affect your life. And usually these moves have triggers, just like adventures or basic play moves that tell the player when they are going to roll for them. For example, Haunted is rolled the first session you play, and then you roll it when the characters are weak or distracted in some way. And you usually don't roll for a disadvantage until the game master have spent all her holds from the last roll.
So the disadvantages are a way for the game master to bring up those traumatic parts of your dark secrets and bring them into the current game?
Yeah, you could say that. Disadvantages, they can work as ways to connect to the dark secrets, and also they work as problem generators that kind of creates drama when you're playing. Because they don't need to be connected to the horror. You can have some of them connected to it and some not connected at all. For example, a character could be a liar, or the character could have sexual problems or phobia for something, or the character could be harassed because she's a part of a minority that have problems in part of the world you're playing.
So what you're saying is it could be elements that aren't necessarily horror focused, but would present complications.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It is time to act under fire.
That brings us to our last segment, Act Under Fire, where Robin and I are going to play through a small actual play segment of Kult Divinity Lost to give our listeners a taste of how the game works.
I was thinking of reading this dear letter to you and have you to make some choices for your character and the situation you are from. And then we just play it from that, and hopefully you will activate some of the play moves and some shit will happen.
I'm excited.
So I begin here. I just want to mention, I'm gonna call you Driver now. I don't mean the archetype Driver, because that doesn't exist in Cult of Divinity Lost. But you're the driver, so I'm gonna call you that anyway. Dear Driver, you're fleeing through the Nevada desert night in an old Dodge muscle car. The AC is broken, and the hot desert wind rushing through the open windows. The fuel gauge is long past red, and you expect the engine to fail any minute now. Choose what you are fleeing from. A haste gone wrong. Some cop died, and your partner Glover is lying unconscious in the back seat with an untreated gun wound. If that is the case, then you also need to tell me what you have stolen. Or, your former boss and her henchmen. Sometimes you have to take what you can get. This time the choices were limited. You have your boss' 5-year-old daughter Destiny in the backseat. Tell me who your boss is and why you are fleeing from her. Or you can choose to flee from an enemy from your past. You thought you killed her, but now she is back and you doesn't seem to be able to get rid of her. In the backseat is your spouse, sleeping after being dragged out of the bed in the middle of the night and forced to flee with you. Tell me who your enemy is. So let's start with this first choice. Do you need me to repeat them?
Nope, I've already made my choice. Clearly, I have taken the 5-year-old daughter from my former boss, because that is amazing.
So, who is your boss then?
Let's go with Claudia is my boss.
Is Claudia like a mafioso, or does she work with something else?
I think Claudia is a wannabe mafioso. Someone who really was trying to get her way into the underground crime world. And it was clear to me that things were not going to play out the way Claudia was anticipating. And I felt really bad for Destiny. I mean, being raised up as the daughter of a crime lord when she's clearly going to be a pawn in someone's scheme, or a MacGuffin, if you would.
Yeah. Okay.
I made the right choice.
Then should we take the next choice then?
Sure, what's my next choice?
Now you're gonna choose what you have to your advantage. You can choose 45 pistol with a half-empty magazine containing untraceable bullets. Or you can choose an old heirloom in form of a First World War bayonet. It is said that bad things happen if you stroke it with blood. Or you can choose to have someone waiting for you out in the desert. And then you need to tell me who.
The cursed bayonet?
Yeah. Okay.
So the curse is activated when it's the blade is stroked with blood, correct?
Yeah, yourself or someone others. And lastly, you need to choose the following. Closing on the highway, you can see an old hotel, long past its glory days, or a retro gas station with a little store and diner, or a small house in Whitred Sage Green.
Abandoned hotel. Is it abandoned or is it just kind of fading?
We don't really know yet.
It's definitely an old hotel.
Definitely old. And I mean, this kind of road is so desolated area. I can't really see how anyone have been driving past here for a long, long time. Until you came. So, as a normal one playing a game powered by the apocalypse, I just want you to describe what you're doing, and sometimes when you do that, you will trigger moves.
What time of day is it?
It's in the middle of the night.
Yeah, let's call my character the driver. I like the mystique of that.
Okay. The driver.
Is Destiny sleeping in the back seat?
Destiny is actually awake and crying. She's hungry, she's tired, and she's really restless from sitting there for several hours just watching the desert while you have been driving.
I think the driver is going to charismatically lean back in the driver's seat and go, Dusty, it's going to be okay. I mean, look, I brought us to where there's this hotel that we could stay the night, and you can even have your own room. Doesn't that sound cool?
I miss Mama, she said, still crying and just looking out in the desert, looking for Claudia and her big car to show up, which she may do any time now. You can also see while the car is kind of coughing on its last fumes of gasoline, that outside the hotel, on a white chair, it sits an old man with dark skin and guitar and playing. And beside him is an old dog, sitting and just kind of looking.
Oh yeah, the driver points at the dog and say, look, Destiny, it's a puppy.
Yeah, she looks at the dog and doesn't look so much happier than before, but it kind of catches her attention anyway.
Do you want to go see the puppy?
Okay, she says. And you don't have so much choice because the car is kind of giving out its last coughs and just slowing down on the road. You can see that Destiny, as soon as the car stops, she kind of jumps out and runs towards the hotel.
The driver's going to take a moment to take the bayonet out of the trunk. And in my head, it's in like a big duffel bag, so you can't see what it is right away.
Yeah, you take it there. Do you kind of like feel it?
Yeah, there's a moment where the driver feels through that cloth bag, like almost if the audience was watching to sort of reassure them, yes, there's this item here. For the driver, though, is there anything unusual about how the item feels? Anything that reveals part of its true nature?
Even if the night is kind of warm, the bayonet is really cold. You can feel the metal against your hand. Really cold. Almost like it was frozen. You know your great-great-grandfather had it in the First World War and brought it back to America. And it is sad that he brought it in the winter in Europe. So for some reason, always the metal have been so cold when you have been touching it.
Yeah, there's definitely a moment where the driver is standing there confused because they've touched the blade through the bag and it's still almost burningly cold despite that it's been in the trunk in a desert for God knows how many hours. They swing the duffel bag over their back and they go up to the man who's playing the guitar with the dog. What's Destiny doing?
Destiny's just like rushing towards the dog, as 5-year-olds usually do. The old man, he have like dark glasses on him, despite it's night, and he's just sitting there playing. Doesn't seem to really notice the girl coming running towards the dog. But you can see the old dog is also kind of not noticing her, and she's kind of just running towards it to get its hand on it. What are you doing?
I think I might be taking in the situation and trying to make sense out of why these two aren't reacting. Would that trigger a move?
Yeah, I would say you observe the situation. So you can roll for perception. In this case, it's +1.
I rolled a 7. That's not good.
No. You try to understand why the man doesn't react and why the dog is so slow. They usually kind of notice people really fast. But it seems really, really old. And when Destiny just runs towards it and she kind of grabs the dog, you can see the dog gets really scared and it turns to her and bites her. She screams out in pain. The old man stops playing and looks like confused. And you stand there on the road while the dog's big old teeth kind of dug in the girl's little arm.
The driver's going to run up and immediately try to intervene between Destiny and the dog. Try to separate the two of them.
The dog looks aggressive now. It doesn't seem to understand what is happening. It just understands something tried to grab it, and it holds her in its big jaw, and you need to do something to get the dog to stop biting her.
I don't think the driver is really subtle. Instead of pulling on Destiny, which seems dangerous to the girl, I'm going to whack the dog, either on the back of the head or on the side, just to get to release its jaw.
Yeah. You engage the dog in combat then. You can roll a plus violence, in this case +1.
My dice hate me because that's a 5.
You're sure you're not rolling 2d6 as well?
No, I got D10 specifically for this recording.
Great. You just have really bad luck today. You hit the dog, and it actually let go of the girl's arm. She falls to the ground. You can see the blood pumping out of the open flesh wound. It's kind of really scary wound she had. But you can also see something else.
What's the other thing?
Claudia's big black Mercedes is coming down the road. She must have seen you a long time ago because it's so open here. You are standing there with her clearly hurt daughter, the old dog still barking, and the old man that gotten up from his chair and is kind of trying to get hold of you, almost like he can't see you, really. He's just asking, "Hello? Who's there? Who's there? What are you doing? What are you doing to my dog? What are you doing?"
Look, your dog attacked my charge here. Do you have a first aid kit? There's definitely panic in the driver's voice. This is going horrifically downhill.
Yeah, actually, I think you should keep it together. You have this badly hurt 5-year-old, you have this blind old man and the dog, and you have the Claudia and Mercedes just coming at you. So roll for keep it together. Roll with willpower this time. You have still +1, so good luck.
I'm rolling with different dice. I need to. So yes, with my +1 this time, substantially better. It is a 17.
That means you grit your teeth and stay the course. You keep your cool. The old man points into the hotel. "Yeah, the first aid kit is behind the reception." And Destiny is screaming loud. The car is coming closer for every second.
Yeah, the driver definitely, at this point, I'm not waiting for Claudia to run behind me. I'm going to scoop her up, that duffel bag still strapped to my back, and run into the reception room.
Yeah, you have the bleeding Destiny in your arms.
Yeah, at this point, I think the driver is trying to keep that wound against their shirt, so the bleeding is at least being absorbed by the shirt.
While you're putting her on the desk and start to take care of the girl, you can see that this hotel, it looks so old, and it's like no one had been here for years. You can't imagine really that anyone would actually stay here. It's like spider webs in the ceiling, and you can see that the guest book is like, they have an actual guest book, the type you write in with a pencil instead of like a computer. No one seems to be here. It's just like an flickering lamp in the ceiling lighting up a little. The first aid kit is really old. When you open it, most of the things have probably just disappeared, but you have a bandage you can use to kind of stop the bleeding if you want to.
Is there anything to clean out the wound?
There are some bottles in it, but you don't know what's in them actually.
All right, we're going to take a random guess by popping open one of the bottles and maybe getting a whiff and taking a smell of what it is. Looking for something that smells a little bit like alcohol.
Yeah. You do so and you find something that seems to be, it's alcoholic. Should work.
This will do. And then I'm going to try to clean the wound and bandage up Destiny, so at least she's not bleeding all over the place.
Yeah. While you're doing that, you can hear the Mercedes stops outside. The engine is still running, but through the door, the door is kind of half opened. You can hear the footsteps from people walking towards the reception. You can also hear the old man asking questions because still confused. You can hear the dog barking.
Is there an exit out of the back of reception?
There is a door there. You don't know where it leads really. But you have the bandage is around Destiny's arm now, and she's still crying and really pale. You can hear how they kind of goes up to the front porch, and yeah. Do you want to try the door? There's a stairwell also.
Well, first I'm going to say to Destiny that I'm going to have a quick conversation that amounts to, have you ever played hide and seek? Because we're going to play hide and seek, and we have to be really, really quiet if we want to win playing hide and seek.
It actually sounds like you're trying to influence Destiny here. Convince her to stay quiet and hide with you.
Yeah, is that a roll?
Yep. You can roll plus charisma. Yeah, +1.
That would be a 9. These dice are also getting put in the box of shame. We're never using these ever again.
You know, when you try to pick her up, because I guess you're carrying her because she's hurt and everything, she just starts screaming and like fighting you. It's almost like she's blaming you for the dog biting her. And she kind of managed to hit you in the face. It's not like dangerously hard, but still some pain when she kind of pokes you in the eye and falls down on the floor and starts running away. You can at the same time hear the door open. You were like going into the back door to hide.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way those guys coming into the hotel that they didn't hear you in that room. I guess you're standing like behind the door in this small little room that has to be the old man's bedroom. There's like a toilet, but no more doors from here, just some windows. And you know that someone is outside.
And Destiny has run away from me, right?
Yeah. You can actually hear her like screaming out in the reception, and you can hear your old boss Claudia's voice when she screams in anger and like fear when she see the bloody bandage and everything. She's not gonna be happy about this. What are you going to do?
That's an excellent question. So I have a bayonet that might be cursed. What is the nature of that curse? Do I know?
Well, you have heard a rumor. You have never seen it yourself. But you can tell me what the thing you heard was.
I think there's a rumor about this bayonet that the curse operates slightly differently because it will trigger off someone else's blood and off your own blood. And I heard a rumor at one point that my grandfather brought it back from Europe, right?
Yeah.
That when my grandfather was in the war and in a situation that he was cornered and he thought he was going to die, that he cut his own hand against the bayonet blade. And he doesn't remember quite what happened, but when his memory comes to, the enemy forces that were trying to corner him were all either dead or just wiped off the face of the earth, did not exist anymore, obliterated.
Yeah, sounds fine. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds perfectly okay, right?
Yeah. So what are you going to do then?
Let's see how much of my grandfather's rumors and memory are correct. I'm going to rip open this bag, pull out this bayonet, and slash it against the palm of my hand and see what happens.
You slash it against the palm of your hand and see the blood dripping from the old bayonet's blade down on the floor. And suddenly, all the lights in the room are shut off. You can hear something moving and then screams. And that's a good place to stop this little act under fire, I think.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I hope it was as enjoyable for you as it was for me.
Yeah, some really bad rolls there, but sometimes it is like that. So
Thank you so much for joining me today, Robin, to talk about Kult Divinity Lost. If people are looking for more of you and your games, where can they find them online?
they should go into cultdivinitylost.com. There we have quick start rules. We have free adventures you can look at. We have links to the shops where you can buy our game, and also to our discussion forums where you can talk with other people playing Cult Divinity Lost.
Amazing. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hello, listeners. This coming October, the Gauntlet will once again be putting on GauntletCon, our online gaming convention. GauntletCon will include guests, panels, a dedicated Discord server for mustering, and lots of RPG sessions. Many will be streamed and recorded. GauntletCon runs October 24th through 27th, with events throughout those days to cover many time zones. If you're interested in our newsletter for GauntletCon, you can sign up at gauntlet-rpg.com/gauntlet-con-2019. GauntletCon's a great gaming experience, and I hope you'll consider joining us as a GM, a player, or a viewer.